Order. Call to order. So let's go, any public communications? And let's move to C1A audits.
All right, thank you, President Segura. Our first item is our audits for the 2022-23 fiscal year. And with that, we'll have Crow present that. I'll ask Dr. Salka if she wants to introduce the item.
Sure, definitely. Thank you, Dr. Geary, and good afternoon to the committee. So we have Kevin Smith, a partner with Crow, going to be providing an update. We've actually got 3 different audits. It's our district-wide audit. It is our bond audit for Proposition O, which is a performance and a financial. And then this is the first time, too, with Measure DD, where we have a performance and a financial as well. So he'll be reviewing that along with Charles Ribley, those particular audits. We've been working with, as we've provided in prior updates, working with the team since the spring. We've been reviewing ASB, we've been looking at attendance, and then over the summer, we did some work as well, and then just recently into October. So it's been an ongoing process, but now it's resulting in our final audit, which will be presented.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here today. Most importantly, we want to answer any questions that you have related to the conduct of the engagements. From a status check, I would say we are 99% complete. One of the key elements of that 1% that's remaining is this meeting tonight. I mean, we have completed our test work. It's in final review stages, dotting I's, crossing T's, but the results that I'm prepared to talk about tonight are our final results. We will be issuing an unmodified opinion upon the financial statements, which is the highest level of assurance that we can provide. It means that the financial statements are prepared in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles, as well as supported by the books and records of the district. In connection with the annual financial statement audit, we also perform 2 separate engagements, and not the bond audits that Dr. Salka was referring to, but the federal grant compliance as well as the state compliance. From a federal grant compliance standpoint, we noted no findings, whether in internal control or compliance findings. And I can tell you that that is a difficult hurdle to clear because federal as well as state, there's not a lot of judgment. It's very binary. It was either a finding that you identified in your testing or you did not identify it. So we have issued an unmodified opinion as it relates to the federal single audit and did not identify any internal control weaknesses. From a state compliance standpoint, we did have 4 findings and reflected those in our opinion. I would give kind of 2 color commentary points on each of the findings in that they are standard. You see them in many districts across the state and primarily related to clerical errors. One of the new aspects of that, we're also required evaluate internal controls that allowed that compliance finding to occur. So that's somewhat of a new nuance this year, that we specify the internal control that broke down as well as any recommendations. They are deemed to be non-compliant in those 4 areas, but I always try to think about what an audit committee member should be concerned about, and none of these rise to the level of overarching concern. Again, we like to see 0 non-compliance, so I'm not dismissing that, but again, not any overarching significant concerns as it relates to these 4 areas. From an internal control standpoint as it relates to the financial statements, we did have 3 findings. Those were consistent with, or 2 of the 3 were consistent with the prior year. They should be addressed by the implementation of the new ERP system as well. So this is the final audit, if you will, under true course. So that's good news both for management, for ourselves, as well as for those sitting on the other side of the dais. The third was really trying to say management should document the processes and procedures that they are currently doing right now as it relates to cybersecurity. So nothing that we identified that they weren't already addressing as a result of the past 12 months. So just saying that that needs to be formalized as part of the process as well. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Charles Ribley and let him discuss the 2 bond audits as well.
Good afternoon. So as Mr. Smith mentioned, my name's Charles Ribley, Senior Manager with Crow, and kind of had a separate set of eyes, if you will, on the two different bond measures that you had actively operating this year and that were subject to our audits. So I'll talk a little bit about each of the different scopes for Proposition O and some of the conclusions on that, and then we'll move on to Measure DD and talk about those equivalent scopes and results. So if you want to jump to the first page of our opinion, which I think is right after this table of contents page. So as Kevin mentioned, this is our financial statement opinion. So the two different scopes that we cover with a bond measure audit are your financial statements and the performance audit. Those are different in their nature of what we do and how the reporting comes out. And that's why you have two different documents that we produce as a result. The financial statement is just that. It looks at your financial picture of an individual measure or proposition. And see, in this case, for the year ended June 30, 2023. And our opinion is, okay, on that date, right, that snapshot in time, what is the financial picture of that measure, in this case, Proposition O? And then also describes the financial activity during that fiscal year. So in our opinion, that was fairly stated in all material respects, and that's, again, the highest level of assurance you're looking to achieve out of a financial audit. And that's what this first paragraph is that I wanted to highlight, and that's our final opinion over Proposition O in this case. And if we jump to the, just the, right on a couple pages down, on the income statement, which is, I think, on page 4, one after this. So that's the balance sheet or snapshot in time, and then this is the income statement activity. So you can see here, this is a interest income that you earned, so funds that were held with the county treasury, and then the bulk of the work is here, or the bulk of the activity, I should say, is here under the expenditures, right? And so as you would expect, capital outlay or construction-related expenditures is the biggest chunk of that. So your total expenditures of around $10.1 million during the fiscal year. And then you also had the issuance of new bond proceeds. So the final activity in that, or the next activity in the Proposition O authorization. Okay, so that $52.3 million was issued during this fiscal year, and we audited those proceeds as well to make sure that they were properly stated. And so the only reason I wanted to touch on that $10.1 million of expenditures is if we jump now to the Proposition O performance audit report. And we can go to the last page of that report, if we will. Actually, sorry, I'll not the last page, sorry. I misspoke. It's page, for you guys, page 5 of the PDF. Okay, so there are certain minimum requirements that the state asks us as auditors to perform or test as it relates to the performance audit. The performance audit, again, is different in scope and nature than the financial statement audit. We're looking at compliance with the performance audit in a broad scale. Compliance with the requirements of Proposition 39, which is what these bond measures were authorized under, and also the project lists that were approved by the board and reviewed by the Bond Oversight Committee. In addition, the district has asked us to perform additional compliance procedures over and above those minimum level to make sure that the district has complied with all the legal requirements necessary on these Proposition O bond expenditures. So I'll go through real high level on each of the procedures that we performed over these bonds as a performance audit for compliance. The first here is compliance with public contract code. So this is looking at a sample of contracts that were entered into during the year to make sure that those followed the public contract code. If you scroll down just a little bit, you can see this is the one that we tested during the year. There was 8 total. We tested 1 and had no exceptions with that. The next procedure is change order. So looking at if you had additional costs that were incurred and you needed to go through the change order process, were those followed as they were supposed to be by district policy and by the public contract code. So we looked at 3 different change orders, which are identified here for 3 different school site projects, and had no exceptions to report out. So that's a good result as well. On the next page, bond expenditures and record keeping. We tested 7.8 million of the 10.1 million that I referenced on that other document. So pretty significant coverage on total expenditures, about 77%. This is the minimum procedure that the state asks auditors to perform, this expenditure testing. So the other work is over and above that, and more intensive and more in scope to make sure that all the different compliance requirements are complied with. So I just wanted to touch on that. Okay, so no exceptions in this testing as well. So going on to the page 5 here, this next page, yes. Looking to see that the physical locations existed, right? So were the projects that were being worked on and incurring expenditures, did they actually exist? So we looked at the one site that was active during the year to make sure that that existed. Moving on, looking to make sure that amounts that were charged by, yeah, there you go at the top here. The rates that were charged by professional service organizations, that those were done based on what was paid or what was charged to you was the actual amount that was agreed upon in the initial agreements with those professional service organizations. So no exceptions there. We looked to see if there were any transfers in and out of the bond fund. So some districts in some cases can borrow money from the bonds, and pay it back. If there were transfers, we want to look through the reasonableness. We had no transfers this year to test, so that's good. We also looked to monitor the planning and execution of projects, making sure that the activity that was reported to the oversight committee was accurate. No issues in that communication compliance testing. We also looked to make sure that the kind of communication of the project status was regularly updated to the public and to the oversight committee with no exceptions. We also looked from a budgeting perspective to make sure that the budget was approved as it was supposed to be, and there were no issues in that from a timing perspective or compliance. So again, these are kind of a common theme for these bonds, so you're happy to say that we don't have any exceptions that we have to, not to spoil the end result, but no issues to report out. But I wanted to make sure we cover all these items. We also wanted to make sure that the oversight committee was meeting regularly as they were intending to. So we were able to identify what meetings that they held and when they held them. So they are regularly meeting throughout the year. So the education code that's written for Prop 39 doesn't specify a specific frequency by which these oversight committees meet, as you may know. So no issues to report. The next one is making sure that community stakeholders are informed. So we have performed procedures to make sure that those are items that were communicated outward through the district's website for Prop O. And then also, I think this is the last one, is preventative maintenance process being in place and actively tracked. So there was no issues with that as well. The last page is a sort of a summary of all the items that we tested during the year. So this is our expenditure testing that was performed for Prop O. So each item that we tested for expenditures. And I went through quite a bit there, but I think it's a lot of good content to really dive into. So if there's no questions on Prop O, I'll go on to the Measure DD activity.
Any questions on O? I
Okay.
don't think so.
All right. So similarly for Prop O as there was for Measure DD as there was for Prop O, we performed a financial statement audit over Measure DD. As Dr. Salkeld mentioned, this is the first year of activity for Measure DD, so you'll see that they had, again, similar to Prop O, proceeds from those debt issuance. So you've been authorized under Measure DD to issue debt proceeds to be able to perform the project expenditures, and so those were done and shown. This is an unmodified opinion again for Measure DD. And if you want to jump to that page 4 of the financial statement audit, bottom right of page 4, sorry, page 6 of the PDF. So I just wanted to highlight this as well. So this is again the first issuance of Measure DD authorization for that $200 million. And then during that fiscal period, you spent total expenditures of $5,886,000. And again, this first year you have a little bit more that's related to contract services, just because things are getting ramped up with architectural costs. Those are classified as contract services. Okay, so that 5.9 approximately spent during the year. And we can jump over to the performance audit report. Okay, so the procedures that we perform over Measure DD were very comparable to Proposition O. So looking at first the contract code being followed for the public contract code and district policy for new professional service contracts. So we tested a sample of 2 out of 14 that were entered into in the current year and had no exceptions issued. So good result there. The next one is in relation to, again, looking for change orders. There were no change orders that were entered into, which was kind of expected in this first initial startup phase. Looking then to that, again, that bulk of our expenditure testing, 3.4 million of that 5.8 was tested for accuracy and appropriateness under the Measure DD authorization. And on the bottom of this page, looking at whether those projects are real and do exist. This phase in Measure DD in this first year was really more about, again, kind of design, architectural costs. There's not really a physical asset to look at yet, so that'll be something that'll be more comprehensive in the following years. And again, looking at professional services organizations, those rates that they were charging, were they in line with what they said they were going to be charging you? And they were in our testing. Transfers in and out, we looked at to see if there were transfers. There were none, as it would be expected in this first year. And looking to see that, again, the planning and execution of projects, that was status of those were communicated. We had no issues in those communication points. We were able to see that those were being made as they were planned. And then looking to communication to the oversight committee, right? So kind of an overall communication on a bi-monthly basis that was to the board, and no issues there. This again was looking at that budget process to make sure that the budget was set in place for Measure DD as a standalone. No issues with that to report. And then similarly, looking at the meetings and making sure those were handled on a regular basis, and they were. And then making sure the website has been created and being updated, and that the preventative maintenance process was in place, again, specific to Measure DD. And then the last page, again, has this table of the items that we specifically tested for Measure DD, just as a reference for the committee and other users. Okay. I know I went pretty granular on that, so I appreciate your patience as we go through that. I think the outcome there is a positive result, and we're able to present this draft reports for you all and your consideration this afternoon. So I'm happy to touch on any other more detailed points or address any questions. I know this is all exciting for us as auditors, maybe a little dry for others, but happy to go into anything you want.
Do we have any questions or comments on any of the information that was provided to us?
Just a question. You said that there was no specific requirement on the number of meetings that the Bond Oversight Committee is required to convene. Is that correct?
Yeah, so some committees where they're at bond, maybe they have a small bond, they might meet annually. They might meet twice a year. The more the better, I guess, is the larger bond program that you operate. But, really we went with, you've just chosen to go to a specific frequency.
It looks like while it's not, a traditional quarterly kind of a meeting, there are only 4 meetings a year on this one, and I think on O as well.
Yeah.
So they considered them both at the same meetings. Okay. I would, and I probably should know this, but are members of the board allowed to sit in on the Bond Oversight Committee meetings?
To attend them?
Yes.
So the short answer, which I'm trying to, is you can attend. Wanted to make sure we're mindful of the Brown Act. So any conversation around policy would be an issue. But it's open, like any member of the public. We just want to make sure that we follow all the Brown Act requirements.
And
Were
just
there to be
specific-
more.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm real curious about the depth of the discussion and whether they're covering issues that, I guess some of the questions that we'd be asking up here before we approve budgets and that sort of thing. So, thank you. And these were very readable. I appreciate that. Thanks.
Superintendent?
Thank you. I also want to point out, and thank you for mentioning it, that actually the scope of our audit is such that it includes items that really go above and beyond kind of the minimum established in law. So
Yeah.
I believe it's the change order rate. I don't know if that's one of them. And then the other one is the preventive maintenance plan.
Yeah, there's several in here actually that go above and beyond in a good way. So the testing of the frequency of the meetings, the change orders, as you mentioned, the preventative maintenance, the communicating as part of the regular communications between the board and the oversight committee, and even the rates, right, of what's being charged. Those are all things that are over and above what is sort of the bare minimum, if you will, based on the ed code. So really doing the extra effort to make sure that the bond program is staying up on point.
Yeah, and I think that also adds a degree of transparency for the public. And so I appreciate that our auditors are testing that to make sure we're meeting that commitment. Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent. I think that's very important that there is a lot of transparency within our props. So that's very important in our audits. Thank you.
And, Mr. Chair, do you want a motion to accept these reports?
Well, not necessarily required. I think it's a sign of good faith and trust in the work
Okay.
that's being done.
Do we have any more questions, or we can move on? Okay.
So I would move that we accept these reports on props O and DD.
Move in second, vote, please. Well, we can just thumbs up.
Acclamation. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm just going to add, so I know we're not really, we're just getting started in a lot of these bonds, and I would imagine next year we'll be, hopefully we'll be spending more money, and that means we're building stuff on our schools that definitely need it, and I'm sure there'll be a lot more, there'll be a lot more spending to look at, so.
Yeah, you'd expect us with the issuance for both Prop O and Measure DD, having those, those two series being issued, you'd expect that those would ramp up. Yeah.
Yeah, so I know the community is very excited about the athletic field upgrades we're doing, and the new buildings on school buildings on some sites too. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. With that, Mr. Chair, we can go from item C1A to item C1B, which is update on requests for proposals audit firms. Dr. Sacco?
Thank you. So this item was just to provide an update, as we had shared at a previous meeting, that we were going to go out to solicit requests for proposals for the audit firm, because we had gone through that 5-year period. And we did that, and in October, we ended interviewing firms, which we brought forward then a recommendation to the board last month for just providing an update that it was Crow out of the 2 firms that we interviewed. Crow will continue with their engagement with the district. And then one thing to note, I know there was a comment raised at the board meeting regarding the partner rotation. So I just wanted to point that out here for the committee, that Ed Code does say about 6 years, and we do have that planned, and that will be Kevin Smith. We will then transition that to another partner with the firm. As it doesn't say audit firms, it's more about the partner. Okay, so it's just an update.
What did the review process look like for the 2 firms?
So I've got our purchasing manager here too, but I can speak to it. We went through a solicitation period, so following the code in terms of when we go out to how we market this proposal. And then we did receive 2 proposals. We reviewed the details of the proposals. There's a scoring of the proposal. And then there's an interview process of both firms.
Okay. Go ahead, Superintendent.
Thank you. Next item is 1C, other ongoing and completed external audits and reviews. Dr. Sacco.
So in your packet, you'll have a table that reflects program reviews and also external audits. You will note that on this particular table, we did add there's an addition since we last met. We did receive a communication from the California Department of Education regarding our school nutrition program. It's their administrative review, so included in your packet does have the letter from the representative, and we will start that work in May of next year. So again, it's just, we'll probably have updates for you as we progress, but probably more so over probably the summer meeting, we'll have the outcomes there. But it's just so that way, and this is typical, it's usually a 5-year window in which they do these reviews. And then the next few items, CalPERS, we've had this here for a while. We've had our payroll manager who's here, also Vanessa Garcia, who's reached out again to see if we've received any update from the state controller's office. And we're still awaiting just the final confirmation. As I've shared before, all the corrective actions have been put in place. It's just receiving that letter that is officially complete is still pending. And then the next item is the AB 139 extraordinary audit. What we have pending there is the full implementation of the N4 computer system. So that was our last corrective action plan. Until that's complete, that'll be on here. And then the next few items are related to our external audit, which was just presented. So that's why we've noted it now as completed. So that's
All right, and I did want to point out that we're down to the last item on that 2018, which we began the transition July 1 of this year. So we're in the process of implementing kind of the Infor business enterprise system. So that should be something that is addressed in the near future. We're hoping by the end of this fiscal year, it's something we can say we fully satisfied that. It's been a work in progress and probably one of the more complex items to implement, but we've definitely made the transition beginning this fiscal year. So thank you, Dr. Salka.
One question. Ms. Sekeld, when will the CalPER pay schedule pay rate review be completed? Have they given us a proposed date?
It's been completed now for some time.
Oh, wait.
Over a year.
External audit?
The CalPERS one?
Yeah.
That we're just awaiting their final official letter saying that they've done
Oh,
their
okay.
complete review. So it was completed over a year ago.
Okay, I see that pending here again. I'll get the lingo down. But it would be nice to see that as soon as it comes in.
We've been following
Thanks.
up periodically.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
All right.
I think it takes us to C2.
Thank you. Yes, C2 is internal audit items, so I'll ask Ms. Enriquez in our internal audits department to go over the internal audit items. Ms. Enriquez.
Yes, this afternoon, the first internal audit item is the department's ongoing and completed document. And I'll wait until that's pulled up. Okay. If it may be helpful to mention, based on discussion that took place in the last meeting, I added footnotes to this document to provide a brief description on what the pending, ongoing, and completed headers indicate. For audits that are pending or have not yet been started, I also added brief comments regarding the timing of those. So this applies for those numbered 2, 3, 4, 5, and 8 on this list. Currently, there's ongoing procedures for the district's fraud hotline, which is number 1, the audit of nutrition services, which is listed at number 6, which is to review student eligibility for free and reduced price meals. Although the district participates in the California Universal Meals Program, through which schools provide free breakfast and lunch meals to all students regardless of their eligibility, that eligibility is still used in the unduplicated pupil count to determine supplemental and concentration grants under the, the local control funding formula. We also have ongoing procedures for ASBs, which is number 7, that includes audits for the 31 school sites. There's 8 that have been completed. And the audit for instructional minutes, which is number 10 on this list, has also been completed. The second section of this document that begins on page 2 is for the non-audit services, which are those that are advisory, consulting, agreed upon procedures, or training. Most of those are ongoing, such as the monthly review of the ASB financial statements for the 31 school sites and the review of commercial warrants that are number 3 and 7 on this list, respectively. As a separate agenda item, I'll actually be sharing information for number 5 on this list that relates to the ASB spend down plans. And the last section of this document that begins on page 4 is an appendix listing all the reports that have been issued in this current year. If we go down a little further, there we go. Those that are highlighted in gray were presented in the prior meeting, and reports that are shared with this agenda item, are those listed as number 4 through 15. And this includes an audit of the unduplicated count, which again is related to the local control funding formula that includes the supplemental and concentration grant amounts based on a percentage of unduplicated pupils in the district, which are English learners, foster youth, or students who meet income or categorical eligibility requirements for the free and reduced price meals under the National School Lunch Program. 8 of the reports are for the audit and/or review procedures for ASBs and includes a follow-up on prior audit findings. These audits are performed to meet an education code requirement for the board to provide for the supervision and auditing of ASB funds, which can be through an internal audit activity. Many of the reports have similar observations which have been addressed through joint training efforts for the ASBs with fiscal services and internal audit. An audit was also completed for instructional minutes the district must meet statutory requirements for. The reports also includes a summary letter providing the results of procedures internal audit performed for the review of the monthly ASB financial statements for the last fiscal year. And there was also a special audit requested by the principal of Bonita Vista High for their ASB Cheer Trust account. The section of the ongoing and completed document indicates there were findings in a report. So if we go back to the previous page, there's a column for findings. So if it has an X in that column, it indicates that there were findings in that particular observations in the report. If there's findings in the report, we provide recommendations for improvements to the current processes for which a corrective action plan is requested, typically within 30 days. For example, the document shows number 4 on the list. A report was issued for the internal audit of the unduplicated count issued on October 17th. There were findings. A corrective action plan was requested by November 16th, and this was received by November 15th. And the report and corrective action plan are included in this agenda item, which begins on page 7. Since the reports and the corrective actions combined are about 262 pages, to be mindful of time, and if the committee had an opportunity to review the reports, is there any particular one that you had questions or comments on or wanted to discuss?
Any comments or questions on any of the items?
Well, I noticed that a number of them were not received by their due date. Do we give them an extension of some kind? What happens in that circumstance?
We just perform a follow-up with them and trying to get that timely. Yeah, so we usually connect with fiscal services as well if we need additional support.
Okay, you don't send a Guido out to get their report done. But generally speaking, you give them an extra 30, 60 days and something along those lines, and then what? What's the hammer to get compliance or to perhaps take action against the fund?
Well, when we get the corrective action plan, we give them an opportunity to implement those corrective actions. We request that they let us know when they plan on implementing those corrective actions, and in the next audit, we perform a follow-up on those prior year observations as well as a corrective action that they plan on implementing.
Right, and my, excuse my, south of my sense of humor here, but I really want them to succeed. I want them to get their reports in so that they can continue doing the good work they do, which is so helpful with students coming together and taking on responsibilities. So I think that's really important. So hopefully we'll give them some reminders and keep nudging, huh? Thanks.
And just for context, each report includes an introduction with background information on the area, and for each observation we provide the standards and the effect, also known as the risks, the causes, and the recommendations if they have the opportunity to implement their own corrective action. If not, they can implement the recommendation.
Yes.
It was more kind of an observation, kind of echoing your comments. Just in reading through these, a lot of the findings are discrepancies like due to a lack of training. So I know that's a recommendation, and I just hope that happens sooner rather than later, just due to the, you know, a lot of inconsistencies with handling cash.
Yes, and go ahead, Dr. Geary.
Superintendent?
Thank you so much. So that's a great point. And actually, we've had conversations with both Ms. Enriquez and Dr. Salkeld about establishing a training program per se. What we've noticed is coming out of the pandemic, there was a significant amount of turnover in the staff that worked with ASPs. It's just for varying reasons. And so one of the things that I know the audit department and Dr. Salkeld and finance have undertaken as an effort, a focused effort to bring that training. In particular, we've noticed a lot of turnover at our middle schools, but making sure that we're providing our staff with the tools that they need to be able to succeed, because ultimately that is what we want, because it supports student engagement. So there is a training program that Ms. Enriquez and Dr. Salkeld have engaged in, and you pointed it out. Sounds like you've been in some of our meetings. Because of the nature of the turnover in staff, there's that need to do continuous training. I don't know if it's required by statute, but it's definitely something that we're internally
Policy.
making happen.
Has there been any discussion about going cashless and coming up with electronic systems of payment?
So the question is about going cashless, and I think your microphone might be off. But I'll ask Dr. Salkeld. I know there's been some exploratory work about being able to handle funds out through an electronic means, but I'll ask Dr. Salkeld to elaborate.
Yes, we have been in conversations probably over the last few years looking at credit card options. So that is something in the works. It's just, our focus has been quite a bit on Infor. We also migrated the system to ASB Works for the ASB specifically. So that now gives us those opportunities for us to explore. That is something that is on the horizon.
And Dr. Salkeld, can you explain a little bit about ASB Works? Does that currently allow us to have electronic payment options, perhaps?
Yes, so that we discovered over the last few years, a lot of our ASBs, even adult schools at the time, were on various systems. And so this brought us, I want to say maybe 3 years ago, we came online with one uniform platform that does have that niche. It's very much tailored to the ASBs. And it gives us now visibility to both finance or fiscal services nor internal audit have that visibility. So now we can see the activity, and it helps support also the schools much more efficiently. And so with that, it does have the ability. There are some of our school sites that already have web stores where they process transactions all online. A lot of our high schools are the ones that have that. So some of them are already there, and that has credit card functionalities. But now kind of actually having a tablet or something where they're going off-site, doing like games or things like that, those are the things we're looking at, because we've been looking at policies as well, and the protocols to do that.
Thank you.
Okay, so that takes us to,
Yeah,
Oh,
sorry, I
Ms.
just wanted
Enriquez?
to add to address Ms. Schmidt's comment. We began the training at the beginning of the calendar year, and if you refer to page 3 of our ongoing and completed, there's a table A, which lists the sites that we've done training for this fiscal year. Starting there. So that's to address it. It was to give an overview of ASB policies and procedures and key processes.
And also it was a 2-day approach where we would have the policies and procedures, and then a separate day just to look at the accounting system of ASB Works, specifically the mechanics.
While we're on still the internal audits, I know we had a comment at our last meeting. If we could just get a brief little follow-up regarding the comments that we had about work process and flow and staffing, if there's been any follow-up from staff on that.
Thank you. Mr. Gdowski, there was follow-up. There was a meeting that occurred between Ms. Enriquez and myself to discuss that particular issue around workflow and workload. Ms. Enriquez, I don't know if you want to take a gander. My version of it is that, in essence, there are a number of things, but they're trying to be really strategic around the planning. So it's a 2-year plan, so that we're in a 2-year cycle for these reviews to help with facilitate some of that workflow. Ms. Enriquez, if you want to add any additional information.
I have nothing further to add.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
okay, where we at?
We are We are at 2B, Associated
2B,
Student
there we
Body
go.
Spend Down Plans, Summary of Activity and Balances.
Okay.
Ms. Enriquez?
Yes, so in August, the Internal Audit Department completed their review of the ASB financial statement packets for the last fiscal year, and for this, we're sharing with you a summary of that activity and the ending balances. For each site, the schedule has beginning fund balance, total revenues, total expenses, ending fund balance, and the net of the activity. No, it's kind of small there, but it also provides for total assets, total liabilities, carryover amounts, and if the site has an excess balance to spend down. Page 1, 2, and 3 of this item are for middle schools, high schools, as well as for the alternative ed and adult schools. And page 3 includes the combined totals. So if we scroll down a little bit further there, we can see that at the beginning of the last fiscal year, there was a little bit over $1 million in the beginning fund balance. Total revenues was about $4.1 million. Total expenses were about $4.3 million, and the ending fund balance was about $787,000. Were there any questions or comments about the schedule?
It doesn't look like there are.
Okay. Moving on to the next agenda item. In the second quarter, a focus for the internal audit team was around the ASB spend down, which is also a joint effort with fiscal services. The expectation is for the ASBs to break even, but most often activities result in a profit, so there is more available to spend on the students. With spend down, there are two concepts. The first is referred to as carryover, which is the amount of money the ASBs have at the end of the fiscal year, and that the ASBs are carrying over into the next fiscal year. And internal audit assists fiscal services with determining if the ASBs will need to develop a spend down plan, which is to ensure the funds raised by students are being spent on behalf of those students versus being banked without a plan for use, while allowing the ASBs to have reasonable amounts to carry over to accomplish future goals. So the item presented on the screen is a summary of spend down balances for the current year and activity for the prior year. On the schedule, this shading in gray is for the prior year and shading in blue is for the current year. And again, I know it's difficult to read. So for example, if we refer to Bonita Vista Middle, which is the first school abbreviated as BVM, as of 6/30/22, the site had an excess balance of $29,293, and during fiscal year 22-23 spent about $18,289 of that, or 62%, based on an approved spend down plan. As of 6/30/23, it was determined that the site had excess funds of $5,755, which they also submitted a spend down plan for. Early September, the Office of Internal Audit sent each of the school sites a memo communication regarding their year-end balances, and those considered to have excess funds were asked to submit a spend down plan, and the next agenda item is an example of one of those communications. Page 1 describes carryover and spend down as well as the purpose, and page 2 provides the methodology used to determine their excess balance to spend down and provides additional relevant guidance. If plans were to include items that involve the planning and design of new constructions or alterations to the site, the ASBs were advised to first submit their intention to planning and construction. And for the purchase of athletic equipment and supplies, the ASBs were also advised to work with the compliance department. After vetting their plans with those departments, obtaining student prior approval, and documenting the action in the student council meeting minutes, the sites were asked to submit their spend down plans to internal audit using a district spend down form. And the Office of Internal Audit reviewed those plans and then passed them along to Dr. Salkeld for her review and approval. Of the 31 school sites with ASBs, there are 10 spend down plans that we are sharing with you today. 2 of those were not required and instead were submitted to revise their prior year plans. And examples of items that are on the plans are year-end picnics, campus beautification projects, equipment, and school-wide spirit items, such as banners. And I think that might actually, I'm sorry, be the next agenda item. This item includes the 10 plans that I just mentioned that were submitted by the ASBs. So they list the projects or items that they'd like to use their excess funds for. They indicate if they had to vet those items through compliance or planning. And then it's passed along to internal audit where we confirm that there's those excess balances available, and the bottom of the form indicates if it was reviewed and approved by Dr. Salkeld. After this evening's review, it's our intent to follow up with the ASBs and another memo communication to provide them with next steps, such as how to purchase the items, how to track their expenses, and expectations to spend their excess funds by the end of the fiscal year. And if sites do not spend at least 50% according to their plan, at year end, they're asked to submit a written explanation in memo format signed by the principal. And the next item is an example of 2 that we're sharing with the committee for spending that did not occur related to the prior year spend down plans. That's a memo from Rancho Del Rey where he provided, for example, a brief explanation where there was a change in their plan. There was a change in principles, but they're moving forward with their spending. Were there any questions or comments about those last few items that we went through?
Trustee?
If I may, so it's a preference that they spend all the money by the end of that school year, and then begin anew with a new balance, building a new balance when they come back for the next school year. But is it an absolute requirement that they spend it all, or can they roll it over to the next year?
We help them determine what's a reasonable amount to carry over so that they do have funding for other future commitments. However, we do encourage them to spend whatever is considered excess so that, again, it's not just banked without intended use and the students can benefit from those funds.
Okay, so not hard and fast, you judge each case on its own merit.
Yes, and those spend down plans are developed as of a point in time, and so things can change. The expectation is for them to also monitor that they still have those funds available.
And they have to keep track of those on a separate sheet or something to verify that this money came from the previous year, not the current year?
Yes, and for accounting purposes, what they're actually recommended to do, and with the help of the accounting team, is that they set aside those funds in a reserve account, which is recorded or reported as a liability on their balance sheet. So it keeps track of how much they have to spend, and they can track their expenses within that general ledger account.
Okay, interesting. Thank you.
I just had a quick question. I noticed one of the purchases is lunch tables for like infrastructure like that. Isn't that more of a school responsibility, or I just wasn't sure if they should spend their money on,
Absolutely. So when it comes to expenditures for the ASB, there's a lot of flexibility. A consideration is that it's to add to the general morale, welfare, and benefit of the student body, and something that's above and beyond what's provided by the district. So if the district provides, let's say, just a lunch area or tables, but the students would like to provide something that's beyond, maybe something better or a different type of table, then it's within their flexibility to purchase those items.
thank you. I noticed that with the golf cart as well, so.
And our last item are actually corrective action plans that were also submitted by 3 sites to address deficit fund balances. There were 3 sites during this year that ended with negative fund balances. There was 1 middle school and 2 high schools. So we've included corrective action plans with the agenda items today to show what their corrective actions are to fix those.
And I think that reflects the balance that we walk with. So there's not a hard and fast rule, because if we indicate that schools must spend everything, then this is a possible outcome of that, which is they may inadvertently overspend it. So when that happens, we do request a corrective action plan in order to address that, and that's why it's a reasonableness approach to this work.
And if I may add, as part of our monthly financial statement reviews, we do monitor their spending to ensure that they're within their budget and that they're not overspending.
These are good tools for financial literacy, that's for sure. Learning how to balance their checkbooks and sock away money for what they anticipate will be future needs. That's great. Yeah.
Lieutenant, do you have something?
I was just gonna say that's definitely an entrepreneurial approach, so that our kids learn, and a lot of this, again, it's ASBs. So our ASB advisors at middle school or assistant principals over ASB lead the work, but in collaboration with our students.
Is there any other questions on this, so we can move to 3?
All right, next item, number 3, is discussion of committee calendar and timelines. Dr. Sacco? And Dr. Sacco, your microphone might be off.
Sorry about that. It's a snapshot of where the various meetings that we hold over the course of the year. Typically, it's 4 of them, so it has a table that details what we typically go over. But this is also just a preview for us to confirm the meeting in March, on March 4th. And the details that we'll be reviewing at that time. It's primarily going to be the first interim report. Just wanted to confirm that date.
My calendar.
Ms. Vicente?
Just to note, the board will select subcommittee members for the subcommittee at the organizational meeting in
Right.
December, so the same board members may or may not be here for 2024. If they change, we will confirm the date with the new ones.
Oh, yeah, that part.
But Ms. Schmidt and Mr. Gutowski, you should be here.
Yeah.
Yeah, yes,
Surf was
I
good
agree.
today.
To 4, review of minutes. I believe that's where we are.
Correct, and this item includes the minutes from the October 16th, 2023 board meeting. Ms. Vicente, I believe after review, if there are no questions, they are forwarded on to the full body of the Board of Education.
Correct.
This is in essence,
Just need your consensus that they're approved.
then they're correct and approved, correct.
Second.
Look good. Yes,
By acclamation, do we hear yes?
yes.
Okay. All right, next item is committee member comment.
I'll just say I'm glad everybody could be here today. I know it's been a while since we've been able to get together, but it's good to see everybody here and hear the news that we've been hearing from our auditors and the district team for all the hard work you do and where we're at. And keeping on top of things. And I know the ASB is always that one's just that I don't know who gets stuck with that job, but man, that's a lot of work. And, with the turnover of the students and the training and that's a lot. But I just appreciate everybody and all their work that they do to keep us where we're at. Any other comments?
Does it have to be about this committee necessarily?
I'm seeing Ms. Vicedo nodding yes.
Yeah, oh, okay, yes. I just wanted to let you know, our student trustee, Isaiah Greenfield, a few months back, placed an op-ed piece in the Union Tribune saying, we all have to vote. And I was really charged up by that, and the next meeting I said, let's do it. Let's have a voter registration drive here at Sweetwater, and he was very excited about it. And this last week, we paid a visit to the Registrar of Voters to get a tour of the now quiet, peaceful operation that will soon be kind of crazy with getting ballots and documents out and getting things in. And I picked up the first 1,000 voter registration forms. Dr. Vernon Moore and I will be figuring out on Friday how soon we can get them out to our high schools. And then we're working with the League of Women Voters, and they will be offering training so that our student or staff volunteers at each of our high schools will be able to guide our 16 and 17-year-olds who would be pre-registering to vote when they turn 18, and our 18-year-olds to get registered. Perhaps take extra forms home for older siblings or parents who are eligible to vote but haven't signed up yet. It's an exciting project. We'll be rolling it out very soon. I'll keep you all posted. It is, there is a deadline coming up to qualify for the March primary election, and that's February 20th. We all have to be registered to vote. If we're already registered, no sweat. But if this is your first time out, you have to get registered, we need to get you in by February 20th so that you're eligible to vote in the primary election in March. So that's the latest on that project. I'm very excited about it, and so are the kids we've talked to. They really, really want to be heard in this important election year coming up. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't think we have any recommendations, or do we? I don't think we have any today, unless you have one, sir.
Nope, just one comment.
Yes, sir.
Santa came early to the district to thank everyone for their hard work with these wonderful audits.
Very good point, sir. So if that's it, then we can adjourn. So we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody, for your time.